All right, Treasury Talent community, welcome back to another Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning discussion, depending on where you are in the world. It is me, Donnie, and the rest of the Treasury team. Everybody say hi.
Hello.
Come on, guys, say hi.
So distracted by that blue shirt.
Yeah, I know. It's bright and blue today, So we've got another fun, interesting topic. I believe this one came from the community, or at least from a lot of the dialogue that we're getting with people on different social media platforms. But today we're going to talk about this new landscape that's kind of come our way, which is the virtual interview. And so just to kind of get us started off, Scotty, can you just kind of share how this whole interview landscape has changed in general since our buddy COVID started to hang out with us?
Yeah, sure. So I think, the first thing to say is I'm sure most of you, anybody who has been interviewing has kind of seen this evolution. It started out in March. And of course, in March, we were all kind of, blown away by what's happening in the world. So no surprise that many jobs just went on hold altogether. Some of those jobs never came back. Some of those jobs maybe still will come back at some point, but companies are now recognizing that, at least for the time being, unfortunately for the foreseeable future, this is kind of the new normal. So now we're starting to see companies need to press forward with their interview strategies. And, maybe there's a little bit of a lengthier time frame around it, but what we're seeing is this is the new normal. So now, everyone has to get on board with the virtual interview. And not just that, you're going to be virtually onboarded, and most people won't even physically meet in person, the team and the new leader that they're going to work for in the coming months, again, for the foreseeable future. So I think that's the biggest change. Like I said, at the beginning, it was, okay, we're just going to wait and see, we're on hold. And now we've gone to, no, we have to move forward. Business has to go on. And so, now we all have to adapt to this.
Yeah, it's really unique, Scotty, because the trend has always been, I think I came across an article in Forbes, it was in early May, that as of March, 89% of employers plan to include video interviewing or some sort of virtual interviewing in their process anyway. Obviously, COVID forced a lot of people's hands in that regard. So if anything, it's escalated, and we're at 100% of those who are interviewing right now. You don't really have a choice. The interesting thing in what we keep hearing in the market is that Treasury is a relationship business. Most of those relationships are developed in person, and having those virtual interviews and those virtual meetings, there's another layer of complexity that exists in virtual that doesn't exist in person. You have to worry about a number of different things, and that's really the point of this conversation is just trying to change your mindset a little bit, bring awareness to the things that you have to be aware of. That's a terrible sentence, but bringing awareness to what you have to consider as you're entering into a virtual interview opposed to an in-person interview.
Yeah, that's good points on both. I mean, obviously, this isn't something, as you're seeing, at least where I'm living, it looks like the inevitable is going to be that we're going to be faced with this type of a process for a while, right? We're all making adjustments in all facets of life. I mean, I know, Simon, you've already kind of had a couple of these situations now and a couple of interviews where, you've had people go through this more of a virtual process. I mean, what's the feedback been from the clients and the candidates that you've had go through that?
Yeah, thanks, Donnie. I mean, absolutely. So I've placed a number of people now who have gone through since March and been offered the role and now are being onboarded virtually. So I guess my key takeouts from what I'm hearing is, as everyone said, preparation is pretty important to make sure that you're ready to go. But if technical issues happen, it's not the be all and end all. You can only do so much to make sure that you're well prepared. I've had a number of candidates who have bombed out because of technology and have got flustered and really bombed the interview on the back of it. The key takeout really is technology is not your fault. There's only so much you can do, and the key point that all of my clients have said is when things have gone really badly, they're happy to give people another chance. You know, technology was the issue. It wasn't the candidate's issue. You know, we had a really hard time hearing, or we couldn't get the video working, whatever it was at the time. Clients are in the same position as you. They're just trying to make the most of a bad situation and make the most of the resources that they've got available. So I have yet to see where technology has happened that the client has blamed the candidate or has, you know, rejected a candidate on the back of that. There's certainly been situations where it didn't go well technology-wise, but that certainly was not the reason that the client didn't progress that person. There was someone who was a better candidate than that person rather than technology. So I guess my key takeout from direct feedback from clients is, if technology doesn't work, just be cool, make a joke about it if you need to, you know, whatever you need to do to make yourself calm, but just keep going through the process as if, you know, not as if it didn't happen, because we know that it happened, but just make the best of the situation, because the client is definitely not blaming you for the technology. And yeah, from a candidate perspective, there's only so much you can do. You use another medium, you know, like pick up, send them an email, you know, call them, whatever it may be, to just make the best of that situation, because the client won't blame you, and you'll still get offered or you'll get another chance as long as you remain calm.
That's excellent feedback.
And we had a similar situation a couple weeks back where the interview was over Skype. The Skype connection, it worked with the recruiter ahead of time, the internal recruiter, but then when it came to the interview time, the person was having a Skype issue and wasn't able to connect. They weren't able to view each other over video. I'm getting texts frantically, hey, this isn't working. You can tell that there's panic in the room. It's from the interviewee side, or the candidate side, more so than the client side. But all that happened was they pivoted, they hopped on the phone, turned out to be a good conversation. That person got moved forward in the process, which was going to be another Skype interview. So I can guarantee you the next conversation that this person and I had was testing Skype out and getting that sorted. But it's just weathering the storm. And when you think about it, it shows your ability to remain calm under pressure. In a corporate environment, treasury environment, stuff's going to pop up that you have no control over and that you're not anticipating anyway. So this is kind of you being put on display when something does go wrong, to show that, hey, you can adapt, you can think through it, you can problem solve. You can turn it into a positive.
And the reality, Joe, is this is work now. You know, it's not like this is just an interview process that we're going through that's like this. This is how you're managing your day-to-day job. So once you're onboarded virtually, you're then meeting your teammates virtually. You're then meeting, you know, the internal customers or your banks or, you know, whoever it is that you're dealing with. All of this is virtual now. So, you know, at the end of the day, all you're really demonstrating is how you're going to be able to work when things don't go right.
The other side of it too is, like, you know, we're talking about the candidate being, you know, interviewed and kind of, you know, scrutinized, so to speak. But as a candidate, you should also be looking at how your employer is treating you. And if you were, in my opinion, if I were going to get on the phone and if we're in this new or something, you know, virtual like Skype, and there was a technical issue and that hiring manager had a problem with that, I don't know that I would want to work for that person anyways, given the things that we're going through, right? So you also have the ability to evaluate somebody else based off of this process and how they respond to that situation as well. That's going to be your boss, and you're going to see how they possibly respond in other situations too.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's what's been kind of an offshoot of these conversations that I've had and presentations that I've given around virtual interviewing is what never occurred to me, and is kind of been the byproduct of this, is that when you move from an individual contributor to a manager to a decision maker role, most companies don't put you through any kind of corporate interview training or anything like that. So all of a sudden, I have people who are decision makers reaching out to me after saying, I never even thought of this. This is stuff that I didn't even know about and that I was never taught. And they want to, so it's geared more toward job seekers, but at the same time, the people who are doing the interviewing are taking value away from these types of conversations too, just because they've never had anyone take the time to coach them.
Yep. I mean, what are some of the tips? And Zolt, I got your question here. We'll get that answered. It's a great question. Joe, what are some tips and tricks for candidates as they go and prepare these for virtual interviews?
Yeah, for sure. So the mistake that we can make is, hey, I'm not traveling to an actual location. Maybe I'm a little bit more laid back because I'm sitting in my bedroom or in a house. Instead of being in front of someone face to face in a conference room, prepare exactly like you would if you were going into an in-person. What I mean by that is make sure that that you have the version of your resume in front of you that you submitted for this role. The last thing you want to do is say, I don't know what version of your resume or my resume you have in front of you, but here's what I'm working off of. Make sure that that's lined up. Whoever's setting up the interview, make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. If not, go off a LinkedIn profile, whatever it is. Same for interviewers. Don't show up without a resume. Know who you're talking to. Know why you're talking to them. That's important because, again, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. Next, bring energy. Don't be the wet blanket in the room. People are more attracted, it leaves a better impression if you're bringing a smile because you're face to face. You're bringing energy to the conversation opposed to being an energy sucker, I guess we can say. So there's that piece. There's still the sales aspect there. If you're the hiring manager, especially if it's like a panel interview, make sure that you know the job description and the roles and the responsibilities, and you know the value proposition for someone who would be joining the team. That way, again, this is stuff that would take place whether it's face-to-face or virtual, but these are kind of table stakes when you're trying to sell a person on an opportunity one way or the other. So know the role, know the responsibility. It's important not only for you, but for anyone else that you're going to include in the process. The last thing you want is to come out disjointed in your interview process because you're on display to potential job seekers as well. And then take notes. You know, what's weird is I could be sitting here talking to you, typing on the computer. You think that I'm sending an email, but I'm actually taking notes. Use pen and paper just like you would. The computer is the big difference because you're talking over it. That means you could have email up, you could have instant messenger up. Turn all of that crap off, no matter which side of the desk you're on. You want to give that person your full attention to give the best impression as you possibly can. And then I always recommend, and I'm terrible at this. Anyone who's spoken with me will tell you this, but I take notes on my computer as I'm talking to people, and I let people know, hey, if there's a delay, it's because you'll hear me typing away like a caveman, because that's what it is. It's click, clack. Interviews, you probably don't want to distract people that way. Take notes with a pen and paper. And that way it allows you to still focus on the conversation. You make the quick notes, and then you're able to ask conversations later on down the line. From a technical standpoint, or I guess right there, Simon, Scotty, is there anything that I've said that you want to add to, or do you want me to continue?
I think we're getting into some of the things that that I would have mentioned, Joe, with regards to just the technology aspect of it. I mean, you mentioned some of them, but it sounds like you're going to get into those. So keep going, man.
The only other thing, Joe, I would say is I would just be upfront if you've got dogs, animals, you know, horses, whatever you keep in your house, or you have family. Just be upfront about it to say, I'm working from home, my kids are home. I just think, I mean, this leads into a really great scenario that I had recently about the human side of what we're talking about. But, you know, I was on a call with a really big client. The treasurer is a really big name. He was just on the call because I was chatting to one of his subordinates, his direct reports. And halfway through this meeting, all of a sudden the little, you know, I don't know, maybe 6-7-year-old girl runs into the room. And I've never seen the tone of a meeting change so quickly. And all of a sudden, straight away, this boss basically forgot about the conversation, asked her questions, chatted to her for like a good 5 minutes, really personally. And I think that's the world we're in now. Like, if people know that you've got family and you're working from home, it's no big deal. Like, if your kid comes in, you don't have to make, you know, it almost shows your human side. So don't do like the BBC reporter where you get your wife to run in and quickly scurry the kid out. Make light of it, or, you know, I think it shows your human side. It shows, again, how you handle scenarios. And for me, I now have a much better opinion of that treasurer because he did not care about the fact that he was there for business. He showed his human side. I came out of that going, he's a really warm guy who cares about his people and cares about their families. And that's what you've got to remember is, at the end of the day, even if you're being interviewed, that's what comes across, not the fact that you shoo the child out of the room. So be upfront with what's coming. You know, obviously that's not an ideal scenario that a child comes in, but I got 3 kids and I know that it's pretty hard to keep them out. So just be upfront, but don't worry about the fact that you've got it. As long as people know what's coming, they'll be fine.
That actually does bring to mind one more thing that's not technical. And that is, address the elephant in the room, man. We're all going through a pandemic where we are essentially, stuck at home. So generally speaking, I think we expect that the interviewer will say, will address something like that. But if they don't, as the person being interviewed, bring it up. Ask, ask if their family, they and their loved ones, kind of the way I like to put it, are you and your loved ones staying healthy and safe right now? Now, of course, there's, some, you could get an answer you don't necessarily want to hear, but again, that's what we're all going through. We're all in this together. So again, not a technical aspect of it, but just part of the situation we're in is to address that head on. And you'll probably find that, that immediately humanizes both sides before you get into the actual business aspect of the meeting.
And it follows the theme that we were talking about with networking and relationship building, where get beyond the transactional. Don't just focus on the technical aspect of the job and feel, because all it really does is make one side or the other feel like they're being grilled. And like we talked about earlier, and Simon had mentioned this, I have 4 dogs. You've heard them during these videos and that type of stuff too, despite my best efforts. But it happens in my calls with hiring managers or clients. It happens in my calls with job seekers too. And all it does is it completely changes that conversation. Oh, what kind of dogs do you have? It's just a brief, it puts people at ease and it builds a rapport, which is another one of the tips that we had talked about, or we are talking about essentially right now, is just humanize the situation, own it, laugh about it, move on, and don't frazzle yourself, because you may cost yourself an opportunity for a job, or you may cost yourself hiring the right person if you're frazzled as an interviewer because something doesn't go the way that you anticipated. So,
and also I think on that, Joe, but the reality of an interview is it's about getting across your personality. There's an element of technical skill that you need to have, but the technical skill is a given. The human side of an interview is what's most important. I get asked a lot, okay, why didn't I get that job? And it's like, well, I can't really give you a reason why you didn't. There were 4 of you who could do the job and they can only choose one. So the person who got their personality across the best, the person who, assimilated and they related to the best is the person that they want to work with. So the more personal you can be and the more you can get across that personality, I think the better you're going to be in an interview. So to me, getting that across, it's a unique opportunity that you can have conversations that you probably wouldn't have in a face-to-face interview because we're in an awkward situation. So as we've all just said, make a joke of it, make people aware of it up front, and then all you're really doing is getting across your personality better, and that's going to put you in a good position.
definitely.
Excellent. Got a good question, and I mentioned it earlier that Zolt asked a question. So he said, I have a virtual tour interview tomorrow morning. What sort of intelligence work should I be doing between now and then? That's a great question.
Yeah, so that actually it is a great question, because it's a perfect segue into just a couple of technical tips to start with. I'm sure that Simon and Joe will add on to this, but the very first thing, the no-brainer, is test your whatever medium it's going to be. Test it, right? If it's going to be via Zoom, make sure you do a dry run with your spouse or a friend or whomever, right? To make sure your Zoom is working. Same thing with Skype or Microsoft Teams, especially if you've never used one of these technologies. Just make sure well in advance that works for you. That would be the first thing. I think the second thing, again, this is maybe slightly unrelated, but or I should say slightly separate topic, but still related. We've heard a handful of people who like to be early to interviews actually interrupting the meeting prior because the hiring manager is using the same Zoom link or whatever it might be. So be punctual. Make sure you set up your situation, on your end 5 minutes early, but be right on time for the meeting tomorrow. In terms of some of the other aspects of how to prepare for a virtual tour, I think Simon and Joe, you should run with that, because that's actually one I haven't. That's a first for me personally.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't run into a client that's done that quite yet. I completely understand why they would do it. Where it's actually it takes a lot of or where I've heard about it quite a bit has been in college football recruiting of all things. You can't do on-campus visits, so they're taking recruits around virtually. I would assume this is going to be the same situation with the office layout. Maybe it's like a walk and talk. You get a feel for what the office space looks like, what the company culture would look like if the building was full, whatever it may be. Be yourself. I mean, that's something that I've done throughout the course of when I've gone to hire for my teams. We used to do walk and talks in the office all the time because it gets me out of the office. It also gives the person a feel for the people who are working there, the energy in the office. Now, this is going to be a little bit different, of course, but you want to take on that mentality that although it is a virtual tour, you still have to be on and you're still interviewing. It may be in a little bit more relaxed environment, but I mean, after you have the technical stuff sorted out, make sure that that you're with it and you're still preparing the same way and that you have your questions prepared and you're still taking notes because there probably is going to be a conversation along the way.
And just to add to that, Joe, I think like you say, for me, that's when you get to know someone the best because they almost have their game face down, thinking that they're just getting shown around. But, that's the time to shine, really. Like, that's when they will be looking at you the most to understand what you're really like. So, yeah, I mean, just make sure that you're well prepared for that. You've got some questions to ask them, that it's not just a one-way conversation. I think having some questions in your arsenal is going to be really important.
Just reading Zolt's comments here, he said the tour part was a typo. So it's just a virtual interview, but we had a nice little segment on the tour.
Yeah, it's like that. I haven't heard that yet. That's awesome.
So good. Thank you, Zolt, for giving us a good laugh and giving us a little chance to give you some more feedback. I
think we covered the virtual interview for him, didn't we, Zolt?
Yeah. So Tanya, how you doing? Any tips for a panel interview with cross-functional leaders you would potentially work with, not directly report to, versus an interview with a hiring manager?
I'll go with this one because I think this is really important. And the reality is most interviews that you're going to, like, there is an element of technical. In this situation, these guys are not going to be technical in Treasury. So they're cross-functional leaders. They're going to be people who are just trying to get to know you. So this is even more important to get across your personality, how you would work with people that don't understand Treasury. I think a really important thing here is if you're going to talk Treasury, don't talk super technical. Talk to them in a way that they're going to understand it, because that's at the end of the day what they're testing you on. Can you explain your job to me in a way that I understand it succinctly? The panel interview in this situation is all about getting to know you and how you're going to work within their business, not within the Treasury function. So just making sure that you dumb it down a little bit for them, but more importantly, you get your personality across and how you would work in a team environment.
From another unique aspect of a panel interview right now, and you've seen us try really hard in this forum not to talk over one another. So I think the key as the person being interviewed is to, pause, give a pause. If somebody stops talking, just brief pause, because the last thing you want to do, especially if you have any sort of a lag from a technical standpoint, is start to appear like you're speaking over others. Again, unique kind of aspect in this particular forum where you're going to be in a video panel.
And definitely along the way, we've learned that where we have to ask direct questions by saying the person's name before we just ask a general question. So
yeah, if you
do have questions for the interviewers,
what do you guys think? Then everyone just sits and stares for a minute.
Yeah. And then it's something you can laugh about afterward.
Yeah,
that's a really good point, though, guys. Is in a panel situation, if you're answering a question, it's definitely worth using their name. Or if you want to ask them a question, using their name, because we do this all the time, and we know it's really hard when you've got four people to not talk over one another, particularly, as Scotty just said, if there's a lag. So just hold your breath for a little bit. A 5-second pause is not an issue. It's going to feel like a long time to you, but a 5-second pause is not really an issue to then answer and make sure you're not talking over people.
Excellent. Thank you for that question, Tanya and Zolt. Those are both great questions. Doesn't look like we have any more. Anything else you guys want to add before we log off here, guys?
Yeah, just from a surrounding standpoint, we talked about just the background noise and everything else that goes along with that. But if you are going to do another difference between in-person and virtual interviews is in-person, in a conference room, in a building, in a coffee shop. It's a setting where you don't have the potential things that could trip you up, like if you have something inappropriate or dirty laundry or something that would be distracting on your wall or anything like that. I mean, I've heard, we won't even get into situations like that. You don't want to distract the interviewer, or you don't want to distract the interviewee with something that's as simple as putting away a dirty shirt that's on a shelf or something like that. And I think I can speak for the four of us that we all have decent backgrounds and there's nothing really distracting there. Joby, I know you're going to give me a hard time about not having Tom Selleck stuff up just yet. It's on the way. But it's just, it's one of those situations where it's a difference that you need to account for. And again, if you can't get yourself in a situation or in a venue where you feel it's appropriate, go in a car. Zoom has an app that you can use on your phone. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to go around it, but it's just something that you have to account for that you wouldn't in an in-person interview.
Good stuff. And Zolt just commented that Simon, he wants to borrow your backdrop for his interview. You think
Hey, Zolt, this is fresh off the boat.
Press.
This one, brand new. Do you know what? I actually got caught. This is a really good example, guys. I do this all the time, and I got caught with a shirt hanging up in the background a few weeks ago. So it happens to all of us. It's one of those things that we're all living in a new norm, and I just thought the way to mitigate it for me was to get a backdrop so that I don't make that stupid mistake.
Hey, one more thing, you guys, while we're talking about it, because I think that it's something that I definitely try to do. I'm sure all of us do this. But it's important too, and it shows, it says something about you as a professional when you're being interviewed, especially to upfront. We talked about setting expectations. You're going to possibly hear dogs. You're going to possibly hear kids. We're doing my best not to make that happen, but it's a possibility. The same thing I think you want to do at the very top in terms of setting expectations is confirm your time frame. Because if they have a hard stop in 30 minutes and there's certain things you want to cover that they should know about you, that'll give you that kind of mental clock set, like, okay, here we go. I have 30 minutes to now cover everything I want to cover. So that'd be the only other thing I'd add is just there's no downside. Perhaps the person interviewing you will say it, but if they don't, once again, make sure you ask, are you and your loved ones staying healthy and safe, and do you have a hard stop today? That'd be the only other thing I'd add.
Yeah, it's a good sales trick. I use it quite often. It just shows that you're being respectful of the other person's time. Like with me, I set half-hour conversations. I know if I run into another talker, I'm in trouble. So I always make sure that I just say, hey, do you have anywhere else you need to be? I have a couple more questions. If they have to stop, that's fine. And it's hey, when can we pick this back up? If not, then hey, we're off and running, and hopefully I'm done within an hour. If I'm not done within a half hour.
We got another question from Myra, and she actually asked, do you recommend virtual backgrounds on Zoom?
Let me take that. Look, I think that they're a good idea. If you've got a backdrop that doesn't work, I think they've got merit. I personally don't like them because it makes the minute you move your head. I'm a bit of a mover, and like the minute you move your head, it goes all fuzzy. And I think it is a bit disconcerting when you're looking at that person and they just don't look right. So I'm not personally a fan. But if you do have a scenario where you don't have an appropriate backdrop, then absolutely, But be careful what you're choosing. You don't want to be the QE2 or one of those that recently was the wrong place at the wrong time. So just be mindful of that. I think is my advice.
Yeah, probably stay away from the beach setting or the Golden Gate Bridge setting or anything like that. See if you can find something professional.
Yeah, when you're looking at just from a technical standpoint, anytime you do something virtual like that, you're going to slow up the speed of the transfer of the call and things like that. And my advice would be to just kind of keep it basic, because you're going to, of all the potential technical issues that can come up, that may just be adding something that doesn't need to, unless you're in a situation where you're just, you know, you've got a bomb drop in the background that you got to, you know, clean up. So,
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you.
The other thing there, Donnie, just on that, the other thing there is if there's a lot of noise behind you, I find that's a lot more distracting than a blank surface. So if in doubt, go to something where there's nothing, you know, just a blank white wall.
Yep.
I think, you know, a blank white wall with one frame or something like that, I think is a lot better. There's no, people aren't looking, trying to work out where you are if it's blank behind you. So the more, the less distractions around you and the less noise, I think the better.
I would say don't do it. Find something else. Go to your car. Just avoid it. That'd be that's my opinion. Don't do it.
Yeah. Excellent, gents. Excellent. All right. Well, hopefully that answered everyone's questions today. Hope you guys found some value in this. As always, we love your feedback. So drop any future topics or maybe something you would want to hear from us next week. Reminders, we do have our first event that we're really excited for, our Treasury Talent networking event coming up. We've got some amazing speakers lined up, as well as our breakout networking rooms that, you know, this technology has not been seen yet. So we're really excited to roll that out to you guys coming up in the first week of August. So we will drop a link to register for that in this video here below. And as always, feel free to reach out to us with anything that you need for your Treasury Talent advice or Treasury Talent, you know, career or team expansion, or for your own personal career. With that being said,
just one more thing.
Yep.
So whilst these are live now, we have a YouTube channel. So Treasury Talent TV is where we house all of our video content. There's a load of stuff there and growing. And that's obviously 24/7 on demand. So if you just search up on YouTube, Treasury Talent, you'll see a whole lot of content there that's growing by the day.
Excellent. We got a topic coming in from Tony already. So we will put that in to the queue possibly next week. Tony, thank you very much for your feedback on that. Talking about the possible negative interest rates coming. So thank you, Tony. We'll put that on the topic list. Everybody, we'll see you next Wednesday, same time, same channel.
Real quick, Tony, if you have, oh, Donnie, you didn't turn it off yet, did you?
Nope.
Tony, if you have an SME that you could recommend around talking about those negative interest rates, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to get in touch with that person, and we can get this moving. That's an interesting topic that I don't want to speak for all of us, but I can safely assume the four of us can't cover. So if there's anyone that you know is an expert on this, let us know, and we'll make sure that we approach that person. We try to get them on to talk about it.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. I mean, speak for yourself. I could probably cover it, but I don't want to show my knowledge.
I know you could.
All right. We'll see everybody.
See you.